Hi! Thank you for joining Dragon Con's alternate and historical fiction track as we plan a tea party. We're going to show you everything that we know, and that way you can throw your own tea party at home. The first step in any party planning is determining what sort of party you're having. In our case, we're going to be kicking off our 2023 Dragon Con, so we're having a little get-together / celebration. But when it comes to tea parties, there are two types. The first type is what most people think of when they think of a tea party. It's an afternoon tea. Traditionally, they occur between 3 and 5 p.m., which is great because you only have to do snack foods and finger foods. And you would have bite-sized sandwiches, scones, and then something sweet to kind of balance out your menu. The menu is served from savory, which is your sandwiches, to sweet, if you're not going to just throw everything out on the table and let your guests serve themselves. Historically, the purpose of an afternoon tea was to socialize and to celebrate. The other tea that you could be hosting is a high tea, which was traditionally served between 5 and 7 p.m. And they were pretty much an early dinner, so you would have a meat dish and your food would be more substantial. Obviously, we're going to go with an afternoon tea, so join us as we start that off. So now that we know what we're going to be doing, we're going to decide if we have a theme or if I even need a theme. Our party is just a celebration, so we're just going to stick with that. Because we are the alternate and historical fiction track, it will be a steampunk tea, so hopefully our guests will come dressed accordingly. But if your party is going to be themed for birthday, or maybe you're going with Alice in Wonderland, which is always a popular tea theme, make sure that your decorations and your decor match. Make sure your guests know so they can dress accordingly. If your party has a specific purpose, it's important to keep that in the forefront of your planning. So again, we're announcing highlights. That's our point. Baby showers, you want to make sure that you've got baby shower games and themes, and that it's all shouldn't be a secret. Your theme should be obvious. Now that we've got our theme decided, we need to plan our menu. Since we're hosting an afternoon tea, I need sandwiches, I need scones, and I need something sweet. Etiquette demands that our sandwiches be crustless and not overfilled, and traditionally they would be cut into fingers. So my sandwiches are going to be a smoked salmon sandwich, which I'll make for the party a little bit later. And right now we're going to make a cucumber sandwich together, which is a super quintessential, typical afternoon tea kind of sandwich. For this, I'm going to need mayonnaise, cream cheese, and my spices. So I'm going to make my filling first. I've already cut my cucumbers and set them off to the side. They actually have to weep because cucumbers have a lot of liquid in them. So they are sliced into thin rounds and placed on paper towel to drain. One thing you do want to make sure that you're paying attention to is if you have allergies in your party, that you compensate for that. My party invitations went to some friends that I know are lactose intolerant. So all of my food will be minimal dairy. And if you guys don't know, haven't checked, there are some amazing things out there in the wonderful world of non-dairy and dairy alternatives. So I'm going to mix my mayonnaise and my cream cheese, add a little onion powder, add a little garlic powder, and a dash of Worcestershire sauce. And I want to make sure that my filling is going to be smooth, because if it's clumpy or not particularly well mixed, then you don't know what your guests are going to get. And it's also going to make the sandwich kind of hard to deal with. So I'm using a non-dairy cream cheese, which Philadelphia does have one of the best cream cheeses when it comes to liquids. There's not a ton in their mix. Non-dairy cream cheeses are kind of a little different. This one's a very dry cream cheese, so it's going to be a pain to get this smooth. We're going to do what we have to do. When it comes to setting up your sandwiches, fingers are traditional. Those are going to be long, thin rectangles, but you can also do triangles. As long as whatever you choose to do is crustless. So we're going to do triangles for this one because I want to make sure that I get to show you all the different types of sandwiches that you can do. which if you guys come back to our next video, you'll be able to see our tea party in full swing, along with finding out what we've got planned for y'all for 2023. Okay, that's clean enough. Okay, so for this sandwich, I'm going to go with white bread. Wheat bread, I'm going to use a whole grain wheat bread for another sandwich, but I want to make sure that my two savory sandwiches are very clearly different. Because I am doing this for a small group of people, I'm going to prep 2 sandwiches to cut into triangles. And my cucumbers have been weeping, so they are ready to go. So I'm going to start by putting my spread on, making sure that I don't let it be clumpy. And because I don't want a overfilled sandwich, I'm going to wipe off the excess and use it on my second piece of bread. Here we go. Okay, first sandwich. Then I'm going to fill it with cucumbers. It's really tempting to stack these too high, but if I do that, they're going to fall out when people eat them, so we're not. We're just going to keep it on the light side. Cut off my crust. And then I'm going to cut these into bite-sized triangles. I'm going to go really small on these, I think. Alright, and one thing you want to make sure you have is serving dishes. For my savory sandwiches, I'm going to use my white serving tray. Okay, and I'm going to save the other half of my tray for my other sandwich. Now, a hosting tip is not everything has to be handmade, because as you can see, making stuff from scratch always takes a little extra time. It's fantastic, but if you're throwing a larger party for, say, 20 people, or if you don't have a ton of time, or you're not even fond of cooking, then don't worry about having everything be handmade. Some semi-handmade, some pre-bought. Your guests will love it, and that's the thing that matters the most, is how much they enjoy their afternoon. One thing to know, though, if you're going to do sandwiches in advance, is to make sure that you bring them out of your refrigerator with enough time to warm up. It is a etiquette faux pas to serve cold sandwiches with cold bread. So our sandwiches will actually be chilled until our party, and then I will bring them out about 20 minutes before, so they have plenty of time to warm up. All right, and because I want to save half of my tray for a different type of sandwich, I'm going to stack these on top. And if it winds up where it looks over full or complicated to grab a sandwich, then we'll set the others aside to refill with. Another little hostess trick, if you're prepping and you're between meal times feeling a little peckish, you can always eat the leftover bits of sandwich that you are not going to serve. All right. Unfortunately, even if you kind of feel like you don't want to keep cutting, once you've started doing something, you've got to finish it out, which is why I still am making fussy, adorable little squares, even though I kind of feel like we have enough sandwiches. All right, there we go. All right, I'm going to set all of this aside. Clean it up later. Okay, so we've got our first sandwich ready to go. We'll prep some others before the party. One thing to make sure that you know, or that you have, is that you have your trays, because that is a party planning necessity. As you can see, we have a nice tray for our sandwiches. If you have larger items, larger trays work out great. But the thing that you often see in tea parties is the 2-tiered or 3-tiered stand. I'm going to reserve this for desserts, and it just winds up being a great centerpiece. It's not a necessity, it's just something that you usually see if you go out to a tea. You're going to find something like this. Another option, if you don't have one of these, which this one is attached to a pole, so I can't move the plates off. They have ones where you can actually slide plates in and out, and that's great if you have your own china or you have your own dishes and you don't want to have like plain white service ones. Then if you find a tiered tray that allows you to remove the plates, then you can put your own plates inside. Another thing, because this is a tea party, you absolutely need to have at least 1 or 2 or however many you need teapots. The recommendation while you're actually having the party is to not refill a teapot with new tea. It's to put that teapot aside, grab a fresh teapot, and serve that with the next batch of tea. But we aren't having a traditional tea party. We're going to have an unconventional one. So my tea is actually going to be tea cocktails, which I'm going to show you how to do now. When it comes to making a tea cocktail, one thing that you have to be aware of is that the heat of the water will actually change how your alcohol works. A lot of cases it'll change the flavor, and in some cases it will actually decrease the amount of alcohol present in the drink. So a lot of what you'll see when you see a tea cocktail at a bar or restaurant is they work with either a tea infusion or they pre-make their tea and cool it down. I'm going to show you how to do cocktails with both of those, as well as a hot tea cocktail. So the first one we're going to do is a hibiscus Cosmo. So this one would not really be appropriate to serve in a teapot, but if you check out our batching panel, which is also available on YouTube, then it'll show you how, if you wanted to make a large-scale version of this cocktail, how you could do that. But I'm going to make a single cocktail. You need a cup full of ice. Ideally, I'm going to shake mine. What I did for my tea is I actually made a simple syrup with it. So I did a traditional simple syrup, 1 part water, 1 part sugar. And then as the simple syrup cooled, I added my hibiscus leaves and allowed that to infuse for 10 minutes, which made a pretty strong and fairly sweet syrup. I'm going to use a jigger. So what we're going to do is we are going to do 1 part hibiscus, 1 part lime juice, and 2 parts rum. Though actually today we're going to switch over and do 2 parts vodka. I put away my knife. Put it back. We would normally serve this in a martini glass. I am not a big martini drinker. By the way, you don't actually have to measure out your lime juice, but I just want you to know that this is about half of what I want for my cocktail, so I'm going to use both halves of the lime. I'm going to do this all into a really fun Mai Tai glass from Heart and Clay. Okay, so I've got my lime juice. I've got my syrup. Now I'm going to add vodka. And I'm doing 2 parts. You always want to, when you're making a cocktail like this that doesn't have really a super strong water component, make sure that you do a good job shaking it. So that way it's not going to be just straight liquor and sugar, which would be a little much. Instead, you have a really lovely cocktail that's blended. And then realistically, if I was serving this, I would also cut a lime spiral or do a lime peel as a garnish. But we're going to set this aside because my party is not now. My party is later. So if you don't want to make individual tea cocktails like that, one, you could batch this out, or you could do a different style of recipe, which is more like a punch. So another way to work with tea is that you can put it together ahead of time, let it seep and cool. So I brewed my tea this morning and I have let it cool over a couple hours. So it's not quite, I wanted it to room temp, it's kind of close to that. And what we're going to do is we are going to add, make it into a punch using my pitcher. We're going to do, hold on, I'm going to get a cup. As you can tell, this is 32 ounces. My tea, after it finished, comes to about 28 ounces. And I want this to be a fun punch for the people who are going to be hanging out and drinking with me. So I have my tea, which is actually just a fruit-based tea. I'm going to add this gin to it once I figure out how to open it. Always have scissors in your kitchen. So I'm going to add gin to it, and I'm going to add a squeeze of lemon, just to give it a nice citrus pop. I have not pre-sweetened my tea, so I will need to add a simple syrup, which I made that in advance. Again, simple syrup, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. I specifically used Demira syrup, Demira sugar. So technically my simple syrup is a Demira syrup. So I have a lot of tea in here. I am making punch for about 4 to 6 people, so I'm going to do 6 ounces of gin. And 1.5 of simple syrup. Okay, and then I'm just going to do a squeeze of lemon. I'm actually going to do that right before we serve it, so that way my citrus doesn't get overly charged. Because I am not going to shake it or anything, I'm going to stir it in my little cup here. And then, hopefully without making a mess, so safety first, so towel. Case of spills. Great thing about doing something like this as a punch is that when it sits in the fridge, it's actually going to mellow out. All my flavors are going to blend, and it'll be extra delicious and chilled. We are in Atlanta, so chilled tea is always awesome. But the last thing I'm going to show you is how to do a hot tea. So again, I'm doing this for a quantity of people. I'm doing it for about 4. So I'm going to take my teapot, and I'm going to actually do all of my cocktail inside the teapot, so when they serve themselves, they will be able to get their cocktail without having to do any mixing on the plate. We are going to do a Earl Grey gin sour. So everything's kind of in the name. Our base is going to be Earl Grey tea. I'm going to do a whole pot. I'm going to add a squeeze of lemon to it, and I'm going to add about 2 shots of gin for my larger group. Just be aware that with the alcohol being hot, it's going to be less, it'll just have less of an APR. You usually lose about 3 to 4%. Okay, so I'm gonna need the kettle with the extra hot water I have boiling. I'm gonna need my tea bags and my gin. Okay, so I've got my bag in. I have a electric teapot, which I absolutely love. If you're a huge tea drinker, I recommend them. And this one boils to temp, so I had this set for black tea. So I'm gonna let that sit and steep for a minute. I am not gonna leave my tea bags in. That's another faux pas. What I'm gonna do though is I'm going to loosen up my lemon. So a bartending trick is you have your fruit, give it a roll, so that way it makes it easier to juice. And don't lose your knife, always important. Downside with lemons is they do have seeds, so they will inevitably wind up in your teapot. I'd like to tell you that I'd recommend straining it first, which I do, but I'm not going to. So do as I say and not as I do. And while we wait for that to steep, I'm pre-measure out my gin. I did something with my measuring cup, so we're not going to worry. Okay, so I'm going to add a little of this. Actually, I guess you probably want to see me do it. All right, my teapot is nice, lovely, and hot. So I'm going to add my lemon juice. I'm not going to stress over the seeds that might have fallen in. My tea's already got a decent color to it. So I'm going to add my gin. And I am going to pull my tea bag out. These are not as easy to stir, so I would recommend if you can and you have a small wooden spoon to use that. If you use the metal spoon, it's just going to clank a lot. But give it a little stir. And now my cocktail is ready to serve. All right, so we're going to make our second sandwich. This is a smoked sandwich with a herb butter spread. This is pretty common too when you go to tea parties. Cucumbers and smoked salmon will often get combined into one sandwich or be available for one or the other. Again, I am making food for somebody that I know has a dairy allergy. So what I've done is I'm using a non-dairy butter. But it's an herbed butter, so first thing I need is going to be some dill. I don't have fresh, so I'm using a heavy pinch of old dill. Some garlic. I put up my spoon, so we're just gonna use the palm method. So half a teaspoon of garlic and a pinch of basil. And what goes better with seafood than lemons? A little squeeze of lemon juice. Okay. And I'm going to mix this together. It's a little on the thin side. I did kind of want it to be a little thicker. So if I had time, I would just pop it back into the refrigerator. But since I don't, we're going to make this work. It'll still wind up being delicious. This one I am doing on a 15-grain bread, so it'll look very different from my cucumber sandwiches. Again, we're setting ourselves up to do 2 of them. So I need 4 pieces of bread. This one I'm not going to cut in triangles. I'm actually going to just leave them in square pieces. But I do have an example of what a finger sandwich would look like. I made a sweet sandwich earlier, which was a peanut butter, honey, and apple, and cut these in fingers. So this is a traditional way to do tea sandwiches. But again, remember, you don't want your bread to be cold, so you want this at room temperature until by the time your party guests get here. So I have it wrapped. I'm going to keep it set off to the side. Another thing I need is green onion, which will go into my butter spread. So I'm going to set my bread aside. And I only want the green parts of the onion, so I am going to cut off the white. myself a little bit of green to go into my butter. It's probably enough. I'm only making 2 sandwiches. Again, we're gonna have a big variety, so no need to overload on any one type of sandwich. Didn't do a great job cutting, so I have to make sure my pieces come apart. And give it another little stir. And I don't have a knife, and this is also really thin, so I'm just gonna use one of these. So start with my first sandwich. Move that back over here. I'm just gonna be moving that back and forth. That'll just be a fun game for us. All right, so I wanna make sure that I'm getting butter spread on my bread and making sure to add some of these green onion elements. I'm only gonna do one side of the bread since my butter is so thin. I don't want my bread to get soggy. And then I need my salmon, which I left across the room. I did get a pepper and garlic salmon, so it'll have some extra kind of zing to it, which will be great. If I can get it to come out nicely. I can find out who just called me. Struggle. Okay, so my lovely pieces of smoked salmon. Remember, you don't want this to be over full, so you want to put it down in a nice thin layer. I'm gonna flip this over. All right, so I'm leaving these just in squares. It's a less traditional shape. We cannot forget to cut off my crust though. It's easier to cut the crust off first, so I regret my choices here, but our guests don't need to know. So there we go. All right, so nice little rectangles. This way my guests won't be confused. They will clearly know which is a cucumber sandwich and which is my salmon sandwiches. I'll set up our second one. Then we're gonna probably massage that placement. Oops, that's too much. This is why I do things on a towel. The towel will get what part just spilled. Someone is determined to call me. All right, I want more green onion than I've got currently in here, so I'm gonna fish them out. Make sure that I get a good spread on that. Pick up my second piece of salmon. It'll work from an edge, I think. All right. Everybody knows how delicious smoked salmon is, which is why my whole house has come to join me in the kitchen. I know. All right, cut off the crust. Tell the cats you're not going to share. And back to my rectangles. All right, and when my placement gets off like this, right, I have what looks like a lot of cucumber sandwiches and not enough salmon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move some of this row down. So I've got some nice full plates that look delicious, not like something's missing. Okay, so my sandwich plate is done. I'm actually now have 3 sandwiches to serve my guests, 2 savory, 1 sweet, and I'm good to go there. All right, so it's time for my tower of sweets. I just like to protect this because it's not a easy to clean tower with a dolly, which will be great. What we're going to do is I have 3 things I'm putting on here. Again, remember, I am a big advocate for go for the semi-homemade. So I have some Trader Joe's macaroons that I'm going to put out. I have oatmeal chocolate chip and walnut cookies, and I have fruit tarts that I've made. So I'm going to start by placing my fruit tarts on the bottom because they are large. One thing you do want to make sure is that you have enough per guest that everyone can have at least one. I have 4 that have these really cute raspberry accents, and I have 2 that don't. So these are just blueberries and puff pastry baked, which came out great. Then I'm going to take my chocolate chip cookies, and I'm going to do 2 different desserts on this top section because these are small cookies. It'll kind of let me pile them up. So right now we're halfway through. And then the great thing about this package of macaroons is that they come in different flavors and colors. As I draw them, I can make this look super cute and just as full as the other side. So the way things stand right now, I have my very adorable dessert stand. I have my tray of savory sandwiches. And I have my tray of sweet sandwiches. We're going to add a couple other things, and this is the food for my tea party. So my guests should have just enough. They won't feel hungry. They'll have something to nibble on. But dinner will still be on them because this is just an afternoon tea.